So you've seen all the videos pop up on the channel. I've posted up slideshows of my favorite moments from DragonCon, famous people that I've met, my favorite cosplay, some My Hero Academia cosplay. So if you haven't checked out any of those things that I just mentioned that are slideshows, make sure you check out those videos on the channel. We have a full playlist. There's probably also a part of the playlist. But you guys probably want to know just what was my opinion on DragonCon. Did I like it? Did I not like it? Let's get into it. I'm gonna play a little bit of like lo-fi in the background. Uh, Not loudly though. I'm gonna turn my volume down just enough to be background. We got a Grammarly ad here. You guys know I don't edit videos, so I'm gonna have to wait to skip the ad. Hey, here we go. So we got a little bit of lo-fi playing in the background. So did I enjoy DragonCon 2018? Why and why not? So I feel like the content for the most part was really solid. I spent most of my time in America's Mart Building 2, Room 204I, because that's where a lot of the comics track events were. And if you sat in that room and you got a really good seat, you could sit in that one seat and you could sit there the whole weekend and not have to worry about anything, which I really enjoyed. So what I mean by that is that like you could stay in that seat and you always knew that the content that was coming into that room would be content that you actually wanted to see if you were into like comic books and meeting comic book creators and artists and writers. Um, you could stay in that room, you could keep your seat, you never have to worry about losing it, and you could just hang out for like a few hours and see all these different creators and hear very interesting stories from all of them. And they all have really different and cool perspectives. So I feel content-wise, it was great. The panels left room for you to be able to ask questions. I like that not all the people on the panels were more or less the same. I think the closest I got to a panel that felt a little uninteresting because of the fact that everyone on the panel more or less said "same here, me too," was there's one about DC collectibles. I enjoyed the panel overall, but I feel like most of the panels had at least a couple people who didn't agree with each other, and it was interesting. And not didn't agree with each other as in like they argued and they fought, but more just they had differing points of views, and you as an audience member could kind of pick like what you favored and what you like who you agreed with more kind of thing, or just not necessarily a disagreement, but just different perspectives. So it's not that they don't agree on the same thing, but they're hitting it from multiple sides, and it just makes it more interesting. At the DC Collectibles panel, it seemed like for the most part, everyone was like, "Me too, I do that too. Me too, I do that too," and you essentially were just getting the same thing from all three people, rather than getting different perspectives from each. Um, but that was still a good panel. I would say that. I don't think I went to a single bad panel this year, like at all. I think the only panel I went to that I didn't really enjoy, it was a panel that I probably shouldn't have gone to in the first place. It just happened to be in that comic book room, but it was about tiki culture, and I just don't know anything about tiki culture. And due to a few things that I'm gonna get into in a moment, I wasn't able to just like get to that room and be able to watch like the whole panel and get a feel for it. So because I couldn't do that, um, I just kind of came in on the end relatively, but long enough for it to be like a thing. Like I brought food with me and I was able to eat like the whole food thing I got. It was like 2 pounds or more of food. I was able to eat that whole thing before that panel ended. So I had enough time um, to like get a feel for it, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with the tiki culture panel. It just wasn't personally for me. So I guess my only gripe would be I don't know why it was in that room. I don't know why it was in the comic room. Maybe they talked about tiki culture comics early on. They talked about it a little bit. There was like a Tiki Zombies comic that they talked about near the end. But there just wasn't enough comic book stuff being discussed for it to really like gauge my interest in that way. So I would say that was it was just a weird venue choice for that. So I think the only other big gripe I would have about venue choice, I don't like that the comics track stuff ended up being split up so much. I get that you may not want to like have a room have content from 11:30 a.m. all the way to midnight. But to stay in that one room that I was staying throughout the con, you go like 11:30 to like 6, um, like 11:30 to 6 or 7, right? So you're there hour after hour after hour after hour getting like comic book content. But I would have actually been perfectly fine if instead of having multiple rooms with comic book content that are going on at the same time where you have to pick between like different rooms for things that you would like to watch, if instead they just said, hey, we're going to put it all in this one room, and what we're going to do is just make it go longer than like past like 7 p.m. But they couldn't do that. I know why they couldn't do that. It's because they put it in America's Mart, and then they made okay. So America's Mart is like this big mall or whatever, and they took like a whole floor of America's Mart and made it an artist alley where you could pick up like art pieces and comic books from your favorite creators, and then they put panel rooms to the side to where you could look at comic themed panels on that same floor, and it made it easy for creators to go straight from artist alley to their panels, and it made it easy for you to go straight from looking at comics and art to going to hear the creators who made those comics and art. So I understand why they did it. But America's Mart has a weird closing time, and the reason why they couldn't go like past 7 is because they closed. You know, it just suddenly would be like, we're not open anymore, so you can't have it. But I feel like if that's the case, maybe they could have done it in a different venue. They didn't always have it there before. I think that's part of my gripe. By the way, I'm gonna skip that song. So they like chose to put it in a location um, that wasn't as good as the old one. The old one used to be you could get there really early and stay in that room, and then they just kept going the whole night. You'd just be getting comic book panel after comic book panel nonstop. Can't really snap with this hand as easily as my other hand, nonstop. Um, and I really enjoyed that, but having it in so early felt weird. And because they had two comic book rooms, it was room I and room J, going on simultaneously. You'd have to pick between events rather than being able to stay in one room and see all the events over the course of like many hours. Um, and I always just opted to stay in whatever room I was in, because then I knew I could guarantee like the perfect seat. Um, and I would just be set. You know, I could just sit there, and I knew that I was getting the content that I wanted to see. Um, and I didn't have to worry about like jumping from room to room and getting like a bad seat each time, because you know the person who stayed from the last panel, like the person doing the optimum strat, is gonna just beat you to whatever would be like the better seating arrangement. Mm. But enough about venues and seating and stuff like that. Like I said, the content was fine. I feel like the location of the content was weird. I feel like the way they split up the content between rooms was weird. Um, and I feel like the tiki culture thing was the only thing that didn't really fit. I guess the Atlantis panel that I went to didn't really fit because it wasn't about comics. It was like in the comics track room, but it was clearly about the Atlantis animated series and how like it almost made it, but it didn't. Um, So I thought that one didn't really fit, but it was a good panel. I actually really enjoyed that panel. That was the last panel that I went to today, and I thought that was a solid panel. But it just didn't really fit the comics track one. Same thing with the Tiki Culture one, except I personally don't have an interest in Tiki Culture, so it didn't grab me like the Atlantis panel. The Atlantis panel felt really unexpected but good. But without further ado, you know, I already talked about how the content was good. I like that they did put it next to the artist alley, but they've always done that. You know, put the comics track events next to the artist alley. That's always been a thing. I just don't think it's ever been this close. Normally, you have to like turn and you enter the artist alley, or you turn and you enter where the events are. For this, you go straight into the artist alley, and the events are in like side rooms within the artist alley. So the artist alley and the comic event rooms were closer than they ever have been before. And I feel like that's a solid positive, but I don't like how early that building closes and the fact that they had to separate their content between rooms. Wasn't a fan of that. The other thing I wasn't a fan of is they flip the script every day on how you navigate to America's Mart. So I feel like I should have had like the easiest experience for DragonCon because I spent the whole time in one room. That shouldn't be hard because it should be a thing where you walk there once and you're like, "Oh, cool. I know the path to get here." And now every day it'll just be really easy because I can just go straight to where I want to go. So the first day, um, I just had to find my way to get there. But once I found my way, I just could stay there for hours and I didn't have to worry about anything else. Um, so the thing that cucked me was on day two, it was a thing where certain bridges were closed, but not all the bridges were closed. So America's Mart, the big mall I was talking about, has multiple sky bridges that connect the different buildings together, and I need to get to building two. What I did on day one is I went to building one, I took the bridge to building three because there isn't a bridge between one and two, and then I took the bridge from building three to building two. That was a little bit that you had to do, but it wasn't too bad. Um, on day two, it was a thing where it was like, well, the bridge you took before you can't take. So you gotta go to the other side of the building and there's another bridge. And then I went with a group of people to the other side of the building and we found like an exit door because the signs were weird. The signs made it seem like you had to go outside the building to get to the bridge, which isn't right. But it wasn't too hard to turn around and realize, oh, the signs needed to point like the other way. The other way is the bridge to the right building, and then you were there. So building one, you had to jump through some hoops, but it wasn't too bad. I mean, not building one. Day one, you had to jump through some hoops, but it wasn't too bad. Day two, they added like an additional layer of difficulty, but it wasn't horrible. Day three was kind of ass when it came to navigating to building two because it became obnoxious. It just got really bad. So the way that this works, right? These buildings um, that are connected by the sky bridges, they're a walk away if you have to like go in a building and then leave a building and then walk around to like get to the other buildings. That's why they built the sky bridges for the convenience of you not having to do it. So on day three, I get to America's Mart. I have a few minutes before my panel, and I'm expecting it to be a situation like day two, where some of the bridges are closed, so you have to take like one bridge. And I'm like, okay, that's not gonna be too bad. I walk in, and they say all bridges are closed. And at first, I think they're just saying the same thing they said yesterday, where they were like, only one bridge is open. And I'm like, no, they just said all the bridges were closed. So then I asked for directions on how to walk to building two, and the directions they gave me were like two steps. They were like, you go left, excuse me, and then you go right or whatever. And I just was like, sure. And then I walked out the door and I got really confused. They may not have said you go left and you go right. They may have said you go right and then you go left. But it really threw me off. So then I tried to use my phone GPS, but my GPS kept losing my location. So I just got like really lost. Um, so I'm lost for a bit, and I finally make it to building two. Keep in mind, I had woken up, um, went to a mall, a different mall, gotten some Chinese food and a drink, and I was carrying the Chinese food and the drink around with me so I'd be able to make it to the panel on time. So when I'm making it to like the America's Mart building, I'm like, oh, I got a little bit of time. I should be fine. So when they give me the like, hey, by the way, all the like sky bridges are closed thing, I'm like, oh man, I don't think I'll be able to make it anymore. So I'm already like late, and I'm walking around trying to figure out what to do. And then eventually the GPS starts acting right, and I find building two. So when I find building two, the sidewalk traffic is awful. There are just people all over the sidewalk going up and down the sidewalk. And I imagine that there's such a big line of people because there's an event. Now, when certain panels are really popular, like so popular to the point where there are lines that wrap like all the way around a building, just for that one panel. Just a bunch of people competing to enter the same room so that they can see like a famous person speak, or like see like a cosplay contest or something like that. So I see this huge line, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to the event. I just want to go in the building. So I circumvent the line. Like I go like all the way toward like where the front of the building is, and as I'm walking, I see someone try to enter the building, and this one man with like a badge goes, woman in pink is cutting in line, woman in pink." And I'm like, oh, okay. So you can't enter the building unless you're in line. That's interesting. So I walk back down the sidewalk, and as some people are passing me in the line, I ask them like, "So this is the line to enter the building, not to get into like an event." And they're like, "Yeah, this is just to get in the building." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I walk back down toward the entrance. Well, not the entrance. Oh, yeah, I did forget to say that. So when I got to building 2, I went to the front doors, and the front doors said exit only. Um, and I was there with a group of other people who were looking at the front doors that said exit only, and there were arrows that were like, go around to the other side of the building. So that's when I had the whole, oh, the sidewalk traffic is terrible thing, and I went around and then realized that it was a line. So I went back to those exit only doors, and I noticed that the line goes even further. Like it goes like past the exit only doors and wraps to like farther down the side of the building. So if this cup is the building, this is like the door that you can enter from, and the line goes all the way back, like back here, from like the entrance door. So you walk all the way around the building. Keep in mind, it's not just you. It's like hundreds of people walking down the sidewalk, all trying to get around the building. And then once you get around, there's this guy who makes sure that everyone gets in single file. And then you walk from where you went all the way back to the front to get in, to enter the building. And I was like, oh, this is absurd compared to like day 1 and day 2. Some people would have said that day 1 was kind of silly. The idea that you got to navigate like the sky bridges. I don't think that's that bad though. Day 2 was kind of gross because I didn't know why they would close all the sky bridges but one. It seems like that would clog sky bridge traffic, which I imagine is what happened later in the day. Because on day 3 they were like, we're not going to use the sky bridges. All the sky bridges are closed. And I was like, oh well, how is anyone supposed to do anything? I guess in a long ass line nobody wants to stand in. So I thought that was really gross. Also, you got to be careful at where you eat during DragonCon. So on day 2, I went to this Chinese food place that I like randomly stumbled upon, and the Chinese food place had like a really good deal. Also, I'm muting the video because there's an ad playing. I'm gonna skip the ad so we can get more of that sweet lo-fi music. Um, but on day 2, I found this nice Chinese food place. I was like very randomly set up, and they had like you can get 2 meats and 2 sides for like $6.45, and they had this new soda, green apple Fanta, and I had a pretty solid experience. It wasn't hard for me to get my food. It wasn't too expensive with the drink. It ended up being like $9 or whatever. That's not bad. I only eat once a day, so that was $9 for what I was gonna eat that whole day. Solid deal. So on day 3 today of DragonCon, I go to a Chinese food place, and this one is different. At the other one, where you can get like 2 meats and 2 sides, they fill the tray for you. At this one, you fill the tray yourself, and instead of it being a flat price, it's like pay for pound. And it wasn't too far off from the other thing's flat value. So it was around like maybe $9 um, for you, like per pound, right? So I load up my tray with essentially the same thing I ate the other day at the other restaurant, except I'd say maybe like one of the meats was different. But it was essentially like the same amount of food that I had gotten at the other Chinese food restaurant. I get up to the front, pay for my food, and it's like $20, and they didn't even have green apple Fanta. You know, like it wasn't a situation. I was just like, oh man, you know, if only I had just gone to that other place. But I was trying to go somewhere that was fast, and nearby the America's Mart building, so I could get to my panel quickly. Because I had timed it to where as long as I stopped somewhere quickly and got my food and went in, I'd be fine. Um, but yeah, I do feel like Dragon Con needs to work on that, like where they put certain events relative to that location's closing time. I think is really important. Where they put um, just how they regulate the sky bridge thing, I thought was really gross. If they had left all the sky bridges open each of the days, um, it wouldn't have gotten increasingly more difficult to navigate. I could have just always used the sky bridges and been fine. They exist for a reason, and they're open when it's a normal mall. Um, I guess Dragon Con's too hectic for them to keep them open. I don't understand. Um, but overall, I had a positive Dragon Con experience. Like I said, I enjoyed the content of the panels. I love the different perspectives from different creators, from different companies. I went to panels based around DC Comics. I went to panels based around Dynamite Entertainment, panels based around Dark Horse, panels based around Image Comics, panels that talked about people's love for certain properties from different companies and um, making adaptations of movies and comic book and novel form. I got to meet so many famous people, and I got to see some cool cosplay. I'm not a cosplay guy. I didn't spend a lot of time looking at cosplay. I ran into one of my friends from high school. It was his first Dragon Con. Randomly ran into him. He's dressed as Darth Vader. He's in the slideshow. You should check that out. Um, so I mean, overall, like I said, I had a good Dragon Con experience. I feel like the only things that made my Dragon Con experience weird were just the choices that like upper management of Dragon Con made in terms of like where certain things were located, how schedules were laid out, um, and just how people were supposed to navigate the con. I just feel like those were the heavy negatives, but the content was good and the content was worth it. Like I said, I only did panels that went from like 11:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., which some people would be like, man, that's like way too short. But that's like hours of discussions and content from like the actual creators, the actual writers, and the actual artists are talking about their work directly to you, and you can ask questions, and it's topics that you care about, and an audience of fellow fans. And I do feel like overall it was a positive experience. Sorry that I had to take the full length of a SpongeBob episode to say that I had a good time, but I did enjoy my time at DragonCon 2018. Did you come? What were your thoughts? And thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to smash that like button, favorite, comment, subscribe, and ding ding ding, ring that notification bell so you're notified whenever we do these videos. There's your host, your friend, your boy, Jet Black, the one and only, logging out. Peace.